This is a donor experience review for the website for communities and schools of Washington State. Now, this site is a little different than the other ones that I have covered. This site, you look at the design of it, and kind of one of the first things you think, and the client will even tell you this, is that the design's a little dated. Granted, it's not horrible. It's not like you look at the site as like, wow, I think they made this the year the internet was invented, but it still is a little bit behind from the perspective of a lot of the visual language that is often and presentation that's used on websites now. And one of the reasons why I picked this site is because clearly there are lessons from the past that we can carry forward, and that there are things that this website does, frankly, better than other sites which are much heavier in video and photography, and that frankly look prettier. So it's really easy to get lost in the aesthetics of a website and kind of lose the thread of the storytelling, lose the thread of the content and the narrative that's unfolding for people when they visit your site and learn all about you. So that'll be one of the things that I get into here. Plus, I think the site has some pretty common opportunities for improvement. When you look at older sites or newer ones, or you're building one from scratch, they're just things to think about, and specifically things to think about with regard to how your website is not only laid out, but how it connects with itself, of how you can have a story unfold over multiple pages for people to learn about you and learn about what you do. So, okay, let's go ahead and dive in here. One of the things I like about this site is that it's very clear about what this organization does and very clear about the overall impact this organization creates. As funny as it sounds, a lot of sites either bury this or really forget to mention it, that it can be so compelling to put forth an attractive image that we can forget the actual meat of the message that we're trying to send. So in this page here, you've got the thesis statement for the organization right here in this first paragraph, and then the high-level input right here in the second paragraph. So you're immediately connecting the dots with what this organization does and the impact that it creates. And this is so, so important that as a visitor, if I don't have that basic understanding of your organization, your basic understanding of the way you work and what you do, as well as the impact that you're creating, as I'm going through your site, learning more about you, if I don't have that basic understanding, I don't really have a place to put that new information. That until I kind of have the basic understanding of your organization, I'm just kind of going around kind of putting information about you in a buffer, but I don't really know how to internalize it. I don't really know kind of in my own mind how to sort it and make sense of all of it. It can be very compelling things, but until I really kind of have the light bulb moment of, oh, I get it, the impact is lost. And so by putting this information up front, it creates that understanding. And by having that understanding, now everything else you're telling me has not only additional weight, but it has a much, much higher level of I'll have a much higher level of understanding exactly what you're talking about and the benefit that you are creating. Now, when I first looked at this site, I thought that the way that the homepage was structured was a really effective model of giving me kind of the high-level overview and then digging in a little bit deeper about how your organization actually works from like a mechanical operational perspective, so what you actually do, and then having an explanation of more about the overall impact that you're creating here. So the overall impact that you're creating for communities, for specific schools, for specific populations, kind of the next level down from this impact to almost 74,000 students. So breaking it down from like the overall to the categories Instead, this section is a little bit different, but I'll talk about that in just a second. So with this section here, talking about their model of what they actually do, is great. You click into it and you have a very brief explanation of what their model is, and then this great infographic here that shows kind of all the inputs and outputs and all of the different people who are involved and what they actually do. This is great. I mean, I found myself reading this entire thing, and if you just put this text on a page, I wouldn't have. That by making it a visual element, building it out as kind of a flow chart of information that I can look through it from the perspective, again, of inputs and outputs and those sorts of things. It's really helpful, really handy, and really, again, like I was talking about a second ago with the thesis statement, it really gives me a place to put this information. I understand how all of these steps relate with one another, which makes the whole organization make more sense. That as I understand how these pieces relate to each other, it makes the whole even more clear, even more compelling. When I understand more about you and more about what you do, that leads to a higher level of engagement. And frankly, I find what you're doing even more interesting. So you remember from the homepage that we had this model, it seemed, of the high-level input, the model, and then the impact. And this is a great flow to walk someone through a story. Unfortunately, you click into this and there's no link for that impact. You're just kind of siloed in this section here. And that's actually a general bit of feedback for every website, to really be thinking about it in two dimensions, of the up and down and the side to side. Of that, often you can have, like this site does, a really clear hierarchical framework of being able to get into the various bits of information, but there's not a lot of cross-linking on the site to jump from category to category, and that becomes really important in a number of ways. But one of the main ways is that you can really choreograph your storytelling a little bit better when you build connective tissue between the different pieces. Like in that model, if this is step 2, give me a link to step 3. If this is step 3, and I happen to land on it, give me a link back to step 2. Allow me to go again up and down and side to side on your site, and things not only make a lot more sense, but really, again, lead to those light bulb moments of I really get what you're doing, and I also can kind of get how I can be involved and help you create impact as a donor. So if we go back to this homepage here and go into this third item of the impact, again, instead of being high level information, this is a personal story of one person. And this, not to say this isn't great content. This is fantastic. Like, this is the thing that actually probably carries the most weight on the entire site, are the impacts that the organization is creating. And I would assume with an organization like this, the impacts they're creating are all individual. That even though it benefits communities as a whole, all that impact starts with a single person, with a single student whose life is now better, whose future is now better, and then whose community is now better, and so on and so forth. So if for me, this page would have been more summary data, getting into like the specific groups that you help. I would have even integrated a little bit of operational things here in case I skipped that piece, which is available on the What We Do services page, which is great. But I would have actually surfaced that information here because it has such a prominent link from the homepage. I would have gotten into that a little bit more. Again, it's not that this isn't a compelling story. This is a great story, but the way that it's presented and the order it's presented in, I think you could shift these things around a little bit and it would be even more compelling than it is. As also a piece of general feedback for this site, this story is screaming for a video and stories like it. It's not that the text is bad. It's just, A, it's long and you have to read all of it, and B, you start putting a face, you start putting a real human image to these things, and everything becomes much more personal. It gives me far more ability to really relate to what's being said rather than kind of a high level explanation of something in the form of statistics or a written story like this. So as far as the site as a whole, being able to integrate video into this, I think would take this whole site a massive step forward. And then those video elements, you could sprinkle them in across the entire site. It wouldn't just have to be in this one vertical of the site, because obviously this is relative everywhere. That clearly explaining and showing impact is valuable practically across the entire site. So if it were me, that would be one of the things that I would do, that I think would really help improve the site. So if we go into the services page, this page is great. In that it really summarizes all the things that you do, which for me leads to even another level of interest in what you're doing, because what you do is so broad. And obviously there are a lot of different potential areas to create impact with people, and this page gives a very good understanding of what those different areas are and all the different things you're doing. That as a donor, that is compelling to me. That's inspiring, that you're doing a whole bunch of different things, because now I can imagine my donation getting used in a whole bunch of different ways. That perhaps one of these, I think, is really the key now, because you've listed it here. Instead of just talking in kind of broad generalities, I can really connect my donation with impact and a specific kind of impact created through a specific kind of intervention. And that's really, really valuable for me. And that if it were me, again, redesigning the site, I would put some form of this on the homepage. I think this is really compelling, again, to not only talk about what you do and the impact you create, but really the breadth of your services and really how you are looking at this from a holistic perspective. And did you know that we can do all of these things to help someone, and this gets really powerful when you're engaged in doing all of them. And I thought that was fascinating. With regard to talking about what you do, again, this gets back to the personal stories of where you could have those peppered in here as well, especially if they're video, and double especially if you're showing me overall change, of where you can give me a before, during, after, really being able to see where things are and where things got to because of your impact, or perhaps a video of a principal or a high school counselor, or I'm sure there's those kinds of stories exist. In fact, I'm sure there's a lot of those kinds of stories, and those kinds of things, again, really help me connect the dots. I can infer what the impact is by reading about what you do and how you do it, but just being able to have that spelled out for me, have it shown to me with actual people talking to me about what you're doing, I think is really engaging. And also with what you're doing with such a wide breadth, you really can't avoid being pretty verbose with having a lot of text and a lot of explanation. Again, a video element. If you could show me 3 minutes of video that would cover the basics of 10 paragraphs of text, that would not only lead to probably more easier understanding for me of what you're doing. It's faster, it's more efficient, and it requires less investment on my part to read through all the things you're doing. So again, I think this site is really kind of screaming for video elements, because it is so personal, it is so human. Like there is such a human interest with what you're doing, and using video for that, again, I think would just be fantastic. So one of the other interesting things that you're kind of getting at what I'm talking about is this achievements page. Again, I would put this kind of content on the homepage of summarized, or I would link to this from that impact blue box on the homepage. But even a lot of this is getting into into statistics, by putting more of a human face, more of a specific community, specific school, specific population. And again, video would be great. But even if you didn't have that, of really helping me understand the deltas that are created by your organization, the way the world is different because of the work that you do as a donor, I can't get enough of that. And in that, I want to, because that allows me to kind of vicariously experience what you're doing and imagine the impact that could be created through my donation in the future. And then also on these pages here where you're really getting down to what you actually do, in addition to like personal stories and community stories and those sorts of things, really working to identify kind of your tidbits that are sort of your, wow, I didn't know that, pieces of information. What are those things? And I say this a lot, but one of the exercises that I do with clients is have them kind of imagine themselves at a dinner party. You're talking to a stranger, like everybody does, and they're asking you what you do, which everybody does, and what are the sort of things that you know when you tell the other person about your organization will cause them to lean in and say, oh, really? That really captures their attention, really piques their interest. Almost everybody knows these things, and it's probably a handful of stuff you keep in your back pocket for this specific type of circumstance. Well, that is not only great fodder for your website content. That's great fodder for things like headlines and pull quotes and sidebar material and things that give people little tidbits of information that are easily digestible, that they can take with them, and that not only inspire them to act now, but when they leave your site and think about you a week from now or a month from now, they'll remember it. That giving people those sorts of bookmarks to remember you by really, really crucial. In that's how we understand organizations. It's not, we don't memorize the 42 things they do. We remember the 2 or 3 bookmarks that we have. We have a shorthand. And so figuring out what that shorthand is for your audience and giving it to them already kind of pre-shorthanded is really helpful and really handy. Again, I think this achievements page is good. I just think it could be better by communicating a little bit more personally, and really getting down to the impacts that you're trying to create, and then also thinking about your content from the perspective of what sort of information tends to convert folks. Meaning, what sort of information tends to convert people from hearing about you to volunteering, or tends to convert folks of coming to your website and donating to you. And knowing those kinds of things and making them prominent, putting them front and center, and really kind of building, you're not necessarily building your website around them, but building your content presentation around those items, of making sure they're prominent and highlighted and focused, so that someone doesn't have to pull those nuggets out of the 5th paragraph of text on a subpage that they may not even see. So really working to surface those kinds of things and making them prominent is really, really important. So, okay. There are a few other pages here that I want to get into. First off, if I come to donating to you from this help out section, so ways to donate under help out versus hitting your green donate button here, I actually think this is a stronger presentation of the donation opportunities than your donate button. That if it were me, I'd actually have this page linked to from your donate button than the one that is linked to now, and we'll talk about that in just a second. I think this page has a lot of really powerful things going on in it. It doesn't mean I wouldn't reorganize it. Like, one of the things I would do to reorganize it is to get this donate button up at the top of the page. That by having me scroll to donate online immediately, granted you've got it here and these link to the same place, I still don't think that's given the kind of prominence that it deserves. So I would move the donate button up to the top of the page, and this is my only donate page. I'd have a donate form expand off of that So like, let's say you've got the green donate button here. You'd click it, and then all this content here would scroll down, and you'd allow people to complete their donation there, or something along those lines of where I would create that pathway for people to give to you. Plus, by putting the donate button up at the top of the page would keep people from bailing out on you. Meaning that if I'm reading this and it's like, okay, and then I get to this donate button and say, sounds great. Well, if I click on this donate button, this takes me to a separate page. So this actually takes me to this donation page here. So I lose everything else that was on this page, meaning that I'm never going to get to this content that's underneath here. And I think some of this is great, like the when you shop content. That's fantastic. In fact, if it were me, I would take all of this. I would remove this stock photo because I don't really think this is pulling much weight on this page, and I put it all right here because this is really the meat of the page, of not only saying that you can contribute with confidence and these sorts of things, but look at how many different ways you can give. I think that's great. And I think that's actually a gift to your donors, is giving them the options and the flexibility to give to you in a bunch of different ways. But by sitting down, at the very bottom of the page, this is buried. And this is really good content here. So I would work to get that up at the top. So let's take a look at this donate page here. In a word, I really don't like this page, and I really don't like it for a lot of different reasons. One, it drops the design of the rest of the site, and visually, this is about the most vanilla, kind of bland way you could present this information, of where I've kind of jumped from a website, it feels, into a Word document, and I've just kind of completely lost the momentum that I had. I'm just presented with a bunch of fairly small text on a long page, and this looks daunting to me. Like, I haven't even read it. I just look at it. It's like, oof. And so for me, this is not visually user friendly. The information here is all fine, but it's not optimized to make this kind of an easy and delightful experience. This looks like filling out paperwork. And so for me, there's obvious associations with that kind of presentation. So I would work to make it look more interactive, again, than just a form, than really a paper form. And then also on mobile, this all gets squeezed down, of where you create a presentation where it's very, very long and you've got a bunch of fields and you're scrolling and clicking, and it's just it's not ideal. So for me, this page bothers me quite clearly. Now, granted, it's obvious you're using a third party. You're using this eJoin Me, like I think it says down the bottom, powered by Greater Giving. And there may be benefits to this that I'm not aware of on the back end, but I think the front end is problematic enough that I'd take a really long look at this platform. I think there are third-party platforms that do this much, much better, and so that would be something that I would think about. Now, okay, looking at this page here, the donation amount, like there are no buttons. This isn't interactive at all. You're not telling me what this will be used for. I don't know what $100 buys. I don't know what change $500 would be versus $250. There's all kinds of opportunities here to really not only incent me to give to you, but really inspire me. That if I knew that this $200 would go to an additional 50 backpacks for kids or something, that's something. But it's just this kind of nebulous. You're kind of requiring me to drag my own motivation into this page, and you're not really giving me anything back. So that's issue one. Issue two is that, okay, let's say I want to give you $100, and do I want my donation to recur? I don't want to give you $100 a month, but I don't want to not give you $100 now, so I'll just let it sit there. Well, if I would have clicked on this, though, which again I would have only done if I wanted to give you this amount of money a month, I would have discovered, oh, wait a minute, I can do a different recurring amount, and I can set that to recur however I want. That's great. That's a nice bit of flexibility and functionality that as a donor, I think that's fantastic. Of allowing me to kind of give the exact gift that I want to is great. But again, I only discover it if I click on that checkbox. So if I knew that was an option, I would be much, much, much more likely to use it than just having me discover it by accident and assuming that I'd have to give you $100 a month. Okay. Thing 3. As far as the overall layout of the form goes, again, there are a million fields here, or at least it feels that way because there's nothing else going on the page. How did I hear about you and your mailing list? Those are fine things to ask. Well, except for how did you hear about us? I would never do that on a donate form because that's just getting in the way. That's adding friction in between me having an intent to give money to you and actually hitting the button at the bottom of the page, which I even have issues with this button. So, so I would get that out of here, or at the very least move it to the very bottom. Same thing with these 3 fields here. Include me in your mailing list, that's fine. As a donor, probably. In fact, I'd double bonus points if this was a mailing list only for donors, which talked about how donations were being used to create real change. That's amazing. And that would personally probably motivate me to give you more money, not only give to you again, but probably give you more. So that's something a lot of organizations can use to really not only create deeper relationships with their donors, but really pay off that donation. Of really, be able to keep in touch with people and actually give them follow through, give them closure on what their donation actually did. Again, only motivates me to give to you again. So then we get down into the contact information. I mean, fine. Again, it feels like there's a lot of fields here, but maybe just because this is all vertical, it just feels like a lot to slog through. I get to the bottom, usual credit card stuff, and then I get all the way here, and I'm presented with this button that I almost can't see. And the blue, like none of this is working for me. The narrow font, the fact that it's black on blue, this button does not say engage. This button says, you can press this if you want to, but it's almost like it's visually, doesn't have even close to the prominence that it should. And for me, granted, I think about buttons on donation forms 1,000 times more than the average human being, but this just bugs me. So doing a better button here would even elevate this form. Granted, again, I know this is a third party and you can't control these sorts of things, but because you can't control them, it doesn't mean that doesn't affect you. And that, again, there are lots of third party options. And if this third party is dragging you down, is compromising you, is causing you to lose donations, then that's an expense, and that's an expense that needs to be honored. And again, there are so many ways to do this better that in this day and age, that would be something I would absolutely do. So, okay, that's the donation page. Now, getting back, one last page. So if we go to the help out and we hit volunteer, like I was talking about earlier, this is another area of the website where you have these lanes, but they don't really connect with each other. And for me, the impetus and the desire to volunteer is the same one as the desire to donate. And yet there's no connective tissue in between volunteering and donating. If it were me, I would integrate those pages a lot more. In fact, I'd have content about volunteering on this help out ways to donate page, because maybe for some reason I hadn't thought about that. Maybe I thought, I could do $50 or something, but then I'd realize, wait a minute, I really like what you're doing, and this is actually another way to donate. I've got every other third Thursday free. I could spend half a day doing something. So it's really thinking about the page and what its job is, and specifically paying off the opportunities that page creates. And when you have something like donations and volunteering, which are so similar, build a road between them. Allow me to kind of do both. In that, it's really easy for organizations to get too locked down into thinking about people as only one thing. That's kind of why we build lanes of where, it's true with a lot of sites. Like if you are a manufacturer, it's true. There are retail customers and there are wholesale customers, and they're not the same, and you do not want to talk to them the same way. So you build their own lanes of where they can kind of have an experience that is specific to them. But with a lot of nonprofits, those lines get really blurry of where you can have someone who is a donor and a volunteer and a board member, or you can have someone that is a volunteer and also can help out with social media, or so you have people who can occupy multiple lanes. And when that's true, it's important to connect them, to have people, again, be able to go through your site up and down and side to side. It's really important. So again, if it were me, I would have this donate button linked to this page. I would put information, I would get this donate button up at the top. I would get the other ways to donate up at the top and have it be really prominent, and then have a little section here about volunteering too. And the same thing on the volunteering page. I'd link back to the donate page. I would talk about how donations enable and equip volunteers, and then allow people to either do both or to be able to jump from one to the other. So really thinking through, not only the amount of ways people can get involved with what you're doing, but be able to present those things on a continuum of on a way where I can connect with all the different ways that I can help you, and jump from one to the other, of not forcing me to know that, I can volunteer with you, so I need to find the volunteer page. Maybe I hadn't thought of that. Maybe I was looking at donating to you, and that occurred to me. So again, building the plumbing so that people can kind of get through your site in a way of where they can go not just hierarchically top to bottom, but can jump from one section to another section that relates to a different section, is hugely helpful. So, all right. Clearly, again, this page, this site, the design of it is dated, but just because of that, and because it uses a lot of text, that isn't necessarily bad, because it actually does a really good job of explaining a pretty complicated thing. That they do a lot of different things by presenting it text only, basically, except for that infographic. By explaining it mostly text only, that's actually a really effective way to explain things. So with regard, this is too heavy with text, but the opposite of the problem isn't the solution. So the solution to the site is not to get rid of all the text and have only video and photos. The key is to figure out how to break your text into bite-sized chunks, make a sequential path through your site of where people can start with a short paragraph and then maybe be presented with 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then maybe be presented with 10 or 12 of where you can unfold the story of what you're doing and unfold the explanation of what you're doing along multiple steps, and kind of leave breadcrumbs for people to be able to follow to learn more about you. That this organization obviously has a very compelling message, and that people want to know it. And so really getting intimate with how to unfold that in a way of, again, where it's phased and you can walk through it, of where you can really see all the different areas, that once I've got this great information and I'm inspired to help you, I can easily see all the different ways that I can help you and make it really easy to get involved with you. All right. One more gripe. On the volunteer page, this is another thing to think about too. Don't make me do your work for you, please, as a donor. In fact, even better, see if you can do my work for me. So I read about this, I see all the different ways that I can volunteer. This sounds great, and maybe I didn't even think of this. Maybe I didn't think about being a board member or an advocate or a tutor. Again, it's reading this, realizing, I have spare time, or, I'm stepping off the board on this organization. I wonder if they could use my help. So presenting this really gives people ideas, obviously, on the ways that they can actually help you that they may not have thought of. But then we get to the bottom of this page, and it's like, well, if you want to learn more, you need to visit your nearest affiliate. So basically, if you want to help us, great, but here's some hoops to jump through. Now, granted, they're pretty minor. But why do that? You have someone who's gotten to the page who has the motivation to help you. Put that here. Say, what's the next step? Well, find the specific communities and schools group that's close to you. And then you can have a drop down or even a map or something interactive to where someone could take that next step. But if you're just kind of leaving them a bit high and dry of kind of saying, well, you can take your next step if you want to, but you got to scroll all the way up. Or you've got to go down to the bottom here and find, that feels like friction to me, and friction against something that's really positive and good. I just would get that out of here. So just building something really simple to allow people, again, if they've got the intent to help you, allow them to pay it off. The same thing with your donate page. Someone clicking on your donate button is signaling the intent that they want to give you money. Your job is to get out of their way and to make that as easy and delightful as possible, and to really give them a conclusion of their experience of whatever has driven them down that path, of whatever has inspired them to donate to you. Pay that off and pay it off in as kind of easy and intuitive and just simple way as you possibly can. Same thing on this volunteer page. People want to help you. That's great. Make it easy. Make it simple. Make it really clear. Tell them what the next step is. Tell them what they can expect past that. Tell them all the ways they can create an impact. And not only will they be inspired to, they're more likely to actually do it.